Varthak 9 had always been a place of fear. It was a planet that had swallowed armies whole, a place where nature itself was a predator. The Galactic Alliance had classified it as a death world centuries ago and placed it under permanent quarantine. No one dared to step foot on its surface unless forced by desperation, and even then, few ever returned. Its jungles were alive with monstrous creatures, towering predators with armored hides, and serpents that could crush entire vehicles like paper. The air carried a poison that corroded metal, the soil pulsed with hidden parasites, and the storms that raged across the sky could rip warships apart. Yet, despite its horrors, war had made the Alliance reconsider its stance. The Zorvash Dominion, a brutal species that thrived on conquest, had taken interest in this forsaken world. Rumors spread that they were building an underground base on Varthak 9, using the very horrors of the planet as natural defenses. The Alliance had no choice but to investigate, so they sent their best soldiers, an elite alien strike team trained for the worst environments in the galaxy. They lasted less than 24 hours. A garbled distress signal reached the Alliance fleet orbiting above the planet. The message was broken, filled with static, but the fear in the soldier's voice was unmistakable. The Zorvash, not alone, something else. Hunting us. Then, only silence. The High Council debated their next move. The risk was too great to send another team, and a full-scale invasion would be suicide. As they argued, an unexpected voice cut through the discussion, a human warrior, Commander Elias Kane. He had been listening from the shadows, leaning against the cold steel walls of the command center. His voice was calm, almost amused. "I'll go." The alien officers turned in shock. No one volunteered for Varthak 9. It wasn't a battlefield, it was a graveyard. But Kane's expression remained unreadable, his confidence unwavering. He was a veteran of 100 wars, a man who had earned respect, even among species that considered humans weak. But this was madness. The High Council warned him of the dangers, listed every reason why he would not survive, but Kane only smirked. "Give me a few hours," he said. "I'll clean up the mess." The descent to the planet was rough. The atmosphere itself fought against his entry, storms raging as if the planet was rejecting him. His drop pod cut through the black clouds, landing deep within the jungle. The impact sent a shockwave through the land, and for a long moment, everything was still. Then, the jungle moved. Eyes watched from the darkness, hidden among the trees, glowing orbs of red and yellow that belonged to creatures that had never feared anything before. Kane stepped out of his pod, his armor absorbing the toxic air, his blades strapped across his back. He took a slow breath, scanning his surroundings. The jungle was unlike anything he had seen, massive roots, twisted like ancient bones, the air thick with the scent of decay. But there was something else, something unnatural. The silence. The Death World creatures were not attacking. They were retreating. Kane's lips curled into a small, knowing smile. They could sense it. They could feel it. Something had arrived that was beyond their understanding. And so, the beasts, for the first time in their existence, chose to run. The Zorvash, however, did not. They had fortified themselves within a hidden base, buried beneath the jungle, convinced that nothing could reach them. Their scanners had detected Kane's arrival, but instead of fear, they laughed. A single human? Against an entire Zorvash outpost? This was nothing more than an amusement to them. They sent their first squad to intercept him, 6 heavily armed warriors, each stronger than an average human, bred for combat, wearing armor that could withstand plasma fire. They found Kane standing in the clearing, waiting. The Zorvash commander snarled, raising his weapon. "You should have stayed in your ship, human." Kane didn't answer. The battle lasted less than a minute. By the time the Zorvash officers monitoring the fight realized what had happened, the squad was already gone silent, motionless figures lying in the dirt. Kane had moved through them like a ghost, his blade a blur, his strikes precise. The jungle floor drank their blood, and still, the planet remained silent. The Zorvash inside the base grew uneasy. This was not how it was supposed to go. They had faced humans before, but this was something else entirely. The base commander ordered an immediate lockdown, sealing every entrance, activating every defense. If the human wanted them, he would have to dig them out himself. Kane only chuckled at their attempt. They thought doors could stop him. He vanished into the jungle, using the darkness as his ally. The Zorvash scanned for him, deploying drones, flooding the tunnels with guards, but Kane was already inside. He had found his own way in, slipping past their defenses like a shadow. The first warning came when the power flickered. The second when the security feed showed nothing but static. Then, the screaming started. Kane moved through the corridors like a force of nature, cutting through guards with terrifying efficiency. The Zorvash, once fearless conquerors, began to panic. They barricaded themselves in the command center, trembling, unable to believe what was happening. One of the officers whispered, "He's not a warrior, he's a monster." The last door sealed shut, heavy metal reinforced with energy shielding. They thought they were safe. Then, a slow, rhythmic knocking echoed from the other side. Kane had arrived. The final confrontation was not a battle, it was an execution. The Zorvash barely had time to fire their weapons before Kane ended them, his blades slicing through their defenses like paper. The commander, the last survivor, fell to his knees, shaking, staring up at the human with wide, terrified eyes. "What are you?" he gasped. Kane tilted his head, considering the question. Then, with a smirk, he answered, "The reason your nightmares run." By the time the Alliance fleet received confirmation of his success, the base had been reduced to ruins. The Zorvash presence on Varthak 9 had been completely wiped out. The jungle, once alive with endless horrors, remained eerily silent. Even the beasts of the Death World knew better than to return to the place where Kane had walked. The Alliance officers stared at the transmission in stunned silence. One human had done what an entire army could not. The legend of Elias Kane spread across the stars, whispered in dark corners, feared even by the strongest warriors. Varthak 9, once untamable, had bowed before him. And from that day forward, the planet was never the same. The war had been raging for years. The Galactic Alliance and the Zorvash Dominion had clashed on countless battlefields, their fleets tearing through the void, their soldiers spilling blood on 100 worlds. But there was one place that neither side had dared to touch: Varthak 9, the cursed planet. It was a world swallowed by nightmares, a place where nature itself was the enemy. Every attempt to colonize it had ended in disaster. Creatures beyond imagination roamed its jungles, storms that could rip apart warships raged across its surface, and the very air carried unseen killers. The planet had been abandoned long ago, declared off-limits to all. Yet now, in the middle of a war that had no end in sight, the Zorvash had broken the unspoken rule. Their forces had landed on Varthak 9, establishing a hidden base deep within the toxic wilderness. The Alliance didn't know why, but they knew one thing for certain: whatever the Zorvash wanted, it was dangerous. They had sent an elite strike team to investigate, some of the best alien soldiers the Alliance had to offer. But less than a day after they landed, their signal vanished. The last transmission received was filled with static, broken words and pure terror. "Something hunting us, not alone. We made a mistake," then silence. No one knew what had happened to them. No one wanted to go after them. The Alliance debated for hours, uncertain of their next move. Sending another team would be suicide. Attacking blindly could make things worse. And so, they hesitated. But not him. Commander Elias Kane, a human warrior, had been listening from the shadows. He had seen too many wars, had walked on too many broken battlefields to be afraid of some cursed world. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, steady. "I'll go." The alien generals turned, shocked. A single human? Against an entire Zorvash outpost? It was madness. But Kane was not like the others. He had been trained for war, sharpened by battles that had broken stronger men. He didn't ask for backup. He didn't ask for guarantees. He only needed a few weapons and a way down to the planet. When the High Council tried to warn him, he only smirked. "Give me a few hours," he said. "I'll clean up the mess." The descent to Varthak 9 was violent. The storm struck his drop pod like a hammer, shaking the metal, howling like living beasts. The thick, poison cloud swallowed the sky, and for a moment it felt as if the planet itself was trying to tear him apart. Then, with a deafening impact, he landed. The doors hissed open, and Kane stepped into the nightmare. The air was thick with fog, carrying a scent of decay. The trees stretched high into the sky, their twisted forms pulsing as if alive. Strange sounds echoed from the darkness, low growls, distant screeches, the rustling of unseen things moving between the shadows. Something was watching him. He could feel it. But as he moved forward, weapons ready, something strange happened. The creatures did not attack. The Death World beasts, the same monsters that had wiped out entire squads before, were keeping their distance. Eyes glowed in the darkness, but they did not move closer. They did not charge. They did not hunt. It was as if they sensed something greater, something beyond their understanding. They were afraid. Kane smirked. They should be. He moved swiftly through the jungle, following the trail left behind by the missing strike team. Scattered weapons, torn armor, bloodstains on the trees, but no bodies. Whatever had taken them had been too fast. As he knelt to examine the ground, a sound broke the silence. A scream.it came from deeper in the jungle. Kane didn't hesitate. He sprinted forward, weaving between the massive roots, leaping over fallen trees. The air grew colder, the shadows darker. Then, he saw it, the Zorvash patrol. But they were not hunting. They were running. Their reptilian faces, usually filled with arrogance, were twisted in terror. Their weapons were drawn, their breathing ragged. Kane watched from the cover of the trees, his sharp eyes scanning the scene. Something had already attacked them. Their armor was torn, their numbers smaller than they should have been. They were being hunted. One of the Zorvash turned, raising his weapon as if sensing something behind him. But it was already too late. From the shadows, something struck, a blur of movement, a flash of razor-sharp claws. The soldier didn't even have time to scream before he was dragged into the darkness, his body vanishing into the jungle. The remaining Zorvash opened fire, bright energy bolts tearing through the air, but they were shooting at nothing. The hunter was already gone. The jungle swallowed the sound, returning to silence. Kane narrowed his eyes. This was not a mindless beast. This was something far worse. He stayed low, watching as the remaining Zorvash argued, their voices filled with fear. "We need to get back to the base," one of them hissed. "We should never have come here." Another shook his head violently. "The human, he's here too." Kane smirked. At least they knew. But whatever they feared, whatever was hunting them, it was clear that the real hunt had only just begun. For now, Kane waited. Let them run. Let them panic. He needed to know more before making his move. The Zorvash thought they were safe in numbers. They thought they could hide in their underground base. But Kane was a different kind of predator. He didn't fear the jungle. He didn't fear the monsters lurking in the darkness. Because he knew one simple truth. The real monster had just arrived. The jungle remained silent, but Kane could feel the unseen eyes on him. The creatures of Varthak 9 were still keeping their distance, watching from the shadows, their predatory instincts warning them not to interfere. The Zorvash soldiers, however, had no such instinct. They were running, stumbling over roots and thick vines, their panic growing with every step. Kane had seen fear before. He had seen men break under pressure, but the Zorvash were different now. They weren't just afraid of him. Something else had shattered them. The missing strike team, the Alliance's best soldiers, had vanished into this jungle, but the Zorvash still remained. Why? What were they protecting? Kane stayed in the darkness, moving like a phantom, tracking them without sound. He could see their heavy breathing, hear their whispered curses. "It's not just the human," one of them muttered. "We woke it up. We should never have come here." Another hissed in frustration. "We don't have a choice." The general gave orders. "The artifact is too valuable." Kane's eyes narrowed. Artifact? That explained why the Zorvash had risked coming to this hellish place. It was always the same. Greedy fools digging up things they didn't understand, unleashing nightmares in the process. And now, it was his problem. The Zorvash patrol reached a clearing where a transport ship waited, its dull metallic body covered in deep scratches. Some were from the jungle's deadly wildlife, but others were deliberate. Claw marks. Something had attacked them from within. The ramp was open, flickering red lights barely illuminating the interior. The soldiers hesitated. They didn't want to go back inside. Kane could see it in their posture, in the way they gripped their weapons. Whatever they had brought onto that ship had turned against them. Then it happened. A sound low, guttural, something ancient and angry echoed from inside the ship. The Zorvash froze, their fear reaching a breaking point. "It's awake," one of them whispered, his voice trembling. "We need to get out of here." Another tried to signal for reinforcements, but it was pointless. No one was coming for them. They had been sent to retrieve something, but now they were trapped with it. Kane tightened his grip on his rifle. He could wait no longer. Whatever was inside that ship, whatever was making even the monsters of this planet stay away, it needed to be dealt with. He moved fast, stepping out of the jungle with deadly precision, his rifle raised. The moment the Zorvash saw him, they panicked. One of them fired, but Kane had already predicted it. A single shot, clean and precise, took the first Zorvash down. The others barely had time to react before he was already upon them. He moved with the efficiency of a trained killer, dodging plasma fire, using the thick jungle for cover. The Zorvash were soldiers, but Kane was something else. He was a force of nature, an unstoppable warrior built for one purpose, eliminating threats. One after another, the Zorvash fell. Some tried to retreat, but Kane didn't allow it. He moved through them like a shadow, striking before they could react, his blade cutting through armor with terrifying ease. In minutes, it was over. The last Zorvash stumbled backward, dropping his weapon, his reptilian eyes wide with horror. "You don't understand," he gasped. "It's not us you should be fighting." Kane didn't lower his weapon. "Then tell me what I'm dealing with." The Zorvash swallowed hard. "An ancient thing. We dug too deep, woke something that should have stayed buried." His voice shook. "Even we are not safe from it." Before Kane could respond, the ship shuddered. A deep, unnatural sound filled the air, like metal groaning under pressure, but it wasn't coming from the engines. Something inside was moving. The remaining Zorvash turned and ran, disappearing into the jungle, willing to face the planet's horrors rather than whatever was inside that ship. Kane stayed, his eyes fixed on the open ramp. The air felt heavier, the temperature dropping slightly. Then, from the darkness of the ship's interior, it emerged. It was tall, its body shifting unnaturally, like it was not fully solid, yet its presence was undeniable. Its form flickered, caught between reality and something beyond. Jagged armor like skin covered its body, but it was not mechanical. It was old, older than anything Kane had ever seen. Its eyes glowed a deep, unnatural gold, filled with something alien and hungry. This was no ordinary monster. This was the true curse of Varthak 9. The creature stepped forward, its movements slow but deliberate, as if testing the air around it. Kane didn't hesitate. He raised his rifle and fired. The energy bolt struck the creature's chest, but instead of burning through, it simply vanished, absorbed into the shifting mass of its body. Kane frowned. That was not good. The creature cocked its head, as if amused, then moved faster than anything that size should be capable of. Kane barely had time to react before it was upon him. He rolled to the side, avoiding the creature's strike, but the sheer force of the impact sent a shockwave through the ground. Kane didn't stop moving. He pulled a fragmentation grenade from his belt and hurled it toward the creature, detonating it mid-air. The explosion sent dust and debris flying, momentarily blinding both of them. When the dust settled, Kane saw that the creature had barely moved. The ground around it was scorched, but it stood untouched, its glowing eyes now locked onto him with genuine interest. Kane exhaled slowly. This was going to be a fight. The creature lunged again, and this time, Kane had no choice but to engage it head-on. He ducked under its claws, his combat knife flashing as he struck at the exposed joints. The blade made contact, but instead of cutting through, it met resistance like hitting solid steel. Kane adjusted his grip, dodging another attack, feeling the raw power radiating from the beast. It was like fighting a living storm, something beyond flesh and bone. But Kane had fought worse. He had faced machines designed for planetary destruction, had battled enemies who thought themselves gods. This thing was strong, but it wasn't. He needed to find a weakness. The creature let out a low growl, the sound vibrating through the air. It wasn't mindless. It was studying him, adapting. Kane grinned. Good. That meant it could be outsmarted. He just needed to figure out how. He adjusted his stance, ready for the next attack. The jungle had fallen completely silent now, the Death World beasts watching from a distance, knowing that something far greater than them was at war. This was no longer just about survival. This was a battle between two unstoppable forces, and only one would walk away. The storm was coming. Kane could feel it in the air, the pressure shifting, the wind carrying the distant scent of rain and blood. He had no time to rest. The creature from the jungle was still out there, waiting, watching. But that was no longer his immediate concern. The Zorvash stronghold lay ahead, a towering fortress built into the jagged cliffs of Varthak 9, its dark metal walls reinforced with layers of energy shielding. It was meant to be impenetrable. Meant to be. But Kane was not here to test its defenses. He was here to bring it down. Through the scope of his rifle, he observed the fortress from the dense jungle, hidden beneath the thick canopy. Patrols moved along the walls, their armor gleaming under the artificial lights. Heavy turrets lined the perimeter, scanning the area for any threat. The Zorvash were preparing for something. They knew he was coming. Good. That would make their fear all the sweeter. Kane activated his comm device, whispering into it. All units in position. A moment of silence, then a response. Ready when you are, came the reply. Give the word, and we light the sky. Kane smirked. It was time. He moved like a shadow through the undergrowth, reaching the outer defenses. A lone guard stood watch, his reptilian eyes scanning the jungle. Kane struck fast, his knife flashing in the darkness. The Zorvash let out a choked gasp before collapsing, his body already being swallowed by the thick vegetation. Kane dragged him into the shadows and slipped inside. The stronghold was a maze of corridors, metallic walls lined with glowing symbols, ancient texts warning of curses long forgotten. And yet, they had still dug too deep. The deeper he moved, the more he noticed something strange. The usual sounds of a military base radio chatter, boots on metal, were subdued, replaced by an eerie silence. Something was wrong. He reached the central command chamber, where the real prize awaited. The artifact. A relic of unknown origin, pulsing with energy, locked behind layers of security fields. It was the reason the Zorvash had come here, the reason they had risked everything. But Kane wasn't here to claim it. He was here to destroy it. Before he could set the charges, a low growl echoed through the corridors. Not a machine. Not a Zorvash. Something else. He turned just as a shadow moved in the dim light. The creature from the jungle had followed him. It was here. The Zorvash had not just awakened it. They had taken something from it, and now it wanted it back. The fortress erupted into chaos. The alarms blared as soldiers rushed to their stations, weapons raised. But they were not aiming at Kane. They were aiming at the thing that had come to claim its vengeance. The walls shook as the creature moved, its form shifting like a living nightmare. It tore through the Zorvash like they were nothing, its claws cutting through armor as if it were paper. Kane used the chaos to his advantage, moving swiftly toward the artifact. He placed the explosives carefully, setting the timers. 5 minutes. That was all he needed. The Zorvash fought desperately, but it was hopeless. Their strongest weapons barely slowed the creature down. This was not a battle. This was a massacre. The fortress, once a symbol of Zorvash power, was now a graveyard. Kane moved toward the exit, dodging debris as the structure began to collapse. He could see the sky now, the storm rolling in, lightning flashing across the dark clouds. The explosives detonated, sending a shockwave through the fortress. The artifact was gone. The stronghold was no more. As Cain emerged from the wreckage, he turned one last time. The creature stood amid the ruins, its glowing eyes watching him. There was no hatred in them, no rage, just understanding. It had gotten what it came for. And now it was done. Cain exhaled, stepping into the jungle once more. The war was over. The hunt was finished. For now. Smoke still rose from the ruins of the Zorvash stronghold, a black scar against the burning sky. Cain stood at the edge of the battlefield, his breathing slow and steady, his eyes scanning the wasteland of shattered metal and broken bodies. The war had been long, brutal, and unforgiving, but now there was silence. He had done what many thought was impossible. He had won. Yet, even in victory, he knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy had watched. The enemies of humanity had seen. And now, they whispered his name in fear. The legend of the human warrior had begun. He walked through the remains of the fortress, stepping over fallen Zorvash soldiers, their once mighty army reduced to nothing. They had thought their technology, their numbers, their superior genetics would make them untouchable. They had underestimated the one thing no alien could ever understand: human willpower. Cain had not fought because of orders, not because of duty. He had fought because he refused to lose. And in the end, that was all that had mattered. A man with nothing left to lose is more dangerous than an entire fleet. As he moved through the ruins, he heard a faint sound in the distance, the hum of engines, the distant roar of approaching ships. Reinforcements. He knew they would come. The Zorvash Empire would never let such a defeat go unanswered. They would send their warships, their elites, their best assassins. They would try to erase his victory before it became a symbol, but it was too late. The galaxy had already taken notice. The word had already spread. A single human had walked into their stronghold, fought their greatest warriors, destroyed their sacred relic, and left their empire in ruins. It was no longer just a victory. It was a warning. Cain activated his communicator, his voice calm. "Extraction team, what's your status?" A few seconds later, a response crackled through. "Inbound. 2 minutes out. You got company?" He glanced at the burning wreckage, the dark silhouettes of enemy ships appearing in the sky. "Yeah," he muttered, tightening his grip on his weapon. "They're late to the party, but they'll try to make up for it." He moved swiftly, heading toward the extraction point. The jungle was dense, the towering trees swaying in the strong winds of the coming storm. Nature itself seemed to be holding its breath, waiting to see what happened next. The first enemy dropship landed with a deafening crash, its metal frame sinking into the wet earth. The Zorvash soldiers poured out, their weapons raised, their glowing eyes scanning for movement. Cain was already in position, hidden within the foliage, his rifle steady. He fired the first shot. The battle had begun again. But this time, he was not trapped inside a fortress. This time, he was the hunter. The Zorvash moved quickly, their formation precise, their tactics efficient. But Cain had fought them before. He knew their weaknesses. He moved through the trees like a ghost, striking fast, vanishing before they could retaliate. One by one, they fell, their bodies hitting the mud without a sound. The survivors hesitated, their confidence shaken. This was not a battle anymore. This was a slaughter. Then the sky split apart. A human gunship roared through the storm clouds, its cannons blazing. Cain saw the reinforcements land, his team arriving just in time. The remaining Zorvash turned to flee, but there was nowhere left to run. The jungle, the fortress, the entire battlefield, it all belonged to Cain now. The battle ended as quickly as it had begun. He climbed aboard the ship, the engines already burning hot as they lifted off. Below, the ground was littered with the fallen, the last remnants of an empire that had believed itself untouchable. He leaned against the cold metal walls of the gunship, exhaling slowly. It was over. But as he looked around, he saw the way his team stared at him. Not with admiration, not with respect, with something more. They had seen what he had done. They had witnessed the impossible. And now they knew. A legend had been born that day, and legends never die.